Mitch O'Farrell, and Monica Rodriguez. Thank you for being here this morning as well. We're going to go ahead and jump right into this. So we're going to go first into public comment and general public comment. And for those items, first and foremost, for multiple speaker cards, is Herman in the room? There you are. Come on up. You know all the rules. If you're going to make another animal sound, one more, you're out. You're not going to disrupt this meeting, and you just did walking up. I'm not going to say the rules every time. I actually gave you a warning just now. Stick to the agenda items, and you know all the rules, so I'm not going to go through them all.
Dear police commissioners and the city administrative officers, while under the detention of the Metropolitan Custody Program for DNA Capacity Enhancement and Backlog Reduction Program, I recall a time when I was entertained at the Metropolitan, and there while I was housed under my disability and my false allegations of a 422, I recall having that swab in my mouth for DNA. Item number 9, case 1-17-CV0099JKB for the record. Fuck the police. DNA capacity enhancement, backlog reduction program, award the amount of $1 million. Fuck you. United States Department
Herman,
of Justice says...
Don't yell into the mic, that's your only warning.
I'm not yelling, sir. I'm amplifying my points. Using force that is objectively unreasonable, including the threat posed, use of ineffective tactics that escalate encounters leading to the use of physical force when it is not necessary to resolve an incident. Use unreasonable force against people such as myself, disabled, homesick, and now under the encounter of a so-called what? Program grant award? Are you that fucking out of your mind? Really? Really? Unreasonable force against individuals with mental health disabilities? Are you fucking crazy yourself? There's absolutely no call for this. So the United States Department of Justice must investigate case 117-CV00099JKB, Herman Wayne Spindler versus the City of Los Angeles Municipal Corporation. In addition to that, now my general public comment. So in addition to crimes against humanity, the United States of America versus the police department and the mayor and the city council of LA, with who other than Richard T. Frank as defendant, representing 42 U.S.C. 14141, Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, 42 U.S.C. 2000D for Dicks, Title VI, the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Street Acts. Am I safe in my streets? Have any of you used the Department of Justice Safe Streets Acts of 1968, 42 U.S.C. 3789D, Safe Streets Act? But you sure fucking like the money. Money and power, Englander and Kanabi. You like the goddamn money. So Title II American Disability Act, 1990, 42 U.S.C., 12131, 12134, Title II. Fuck all of you, and fuck you, Englander, you big eared dick.
All right, Mr. Previn.
Well, okay, it's Eric Previn from Studio City. I'm on a neighborhood council, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself. And my comments might include some negative criticism, and I would like to not be interrupted and exercise all of the constitutional protections that are afforded.
As long as you're speaking on the agenda items.
Yeah, I'm always on the agenda, sir. Item number 7 involves IP protection, intellectual property. It's a grant for $400,000. And the thought there is, we got sort of 15 police officers working in this division overall. You know, I think that the studios and the others have to kind of be their own enforcers. We need DAs to prosecute these crimes, but we can't. That's a drop in the bucket, and we could use those funds. Item number 1 is we're adding a $132,000 position control officer, though we're changing the name to kind of look after the. In 2017, the fourth quarter alone, we had 222 sworn fire department guys off on IOD. And during that time, an average of 45 employees returned to work. So we want to keep the momentum moving in the direction of getting people back to work. You could see the article by Jack Dolan about some of the issues in those programs. Item number 2 is at about 200 an hour. We're doing inspections now. We're going to add some inspections because nothing in the law prevents us from going after folks for voluntary where they get a fire clearance letter. So, we can't really do much about it. It's a question as to whether or not we want to saddle folks with more and more costs, but it's, some people believe that the service is being paid for already and that these should not be service upcharges. Others are different. Item number 3, sir, is the HOPE team. Now, HOPE teams are controversial. They're so important when you've got a really dangerous situation to get them out, but these are HOPE teams with a bulldozer. So that puts things in a question. Only 1 out of 5 of the folks who get the service, who get collected by HOPE, go to services. So we're losing 80% to who knows what. Maybe they go to jail. And for the record, district by district, the leader is Weezar, then O'Farrell, then Price, then Wesson, then Cedillo, then Martinez are the top, service calls for those things. We don't have as many in my area. Item number 10 is $200,000 for internet crimes against children, which is obviously a good thing, but 125 of that 200 grand is for equipment, which raised some eyebrows. And item number 13 is your PIOs did a mock trial kind of situation. It's called a mic drop. And, obviously Peter
So you are on general public comment.
PIOs, right, but I'm on, okay.
Excuse me 1 second, Herman.
Hold it.
You're excused from this room. No, don't stop your time.
Well,
You're disrupting this meeting, making sounds. You were warned when you walked in. You're warned every single day. Don't make any sounds leaving this room either. Just go ahead and leave. You're disrupting the public comment portion. So the public comment and the public can't participate. Don't make any noises on your way out. Sergeants, just show them out. Stop talking in the meeting. You're still disrupting this meeting. Go ahead. Go. Go. Thank you. Go ahead. And the record noted that he's not only continuing to talk but share. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
what are we going to do about the time? There was sort of a...
We're going to start your clock. We held it. Go ahead. I'll give you extra. I'll give you your 3 seconds back when you're finished.
It was more than 3, so why don't you just give me a minute and I'll finish my public...
Go ahead and finish on your 15 seconds. I'll give you the other 3 seconds when you're finished. Start his clock, please. Thank you.
You were just saying that it was you were trying to protect the public comment. Now you've radically reduced my time, but the PIOs had a mock trial about how to get information out, and you ought to read the Intercept article, Mr. Englander, wherein homeless folks were blamed for a fire where the evidence was not good. And I would like to submit to the record this, which is a classic example of what they provide when you ask for information. Please.
Okay, and that's your time. Thank you very much. All right, so Ms. Brown as well. Do we have a Ms. Brown? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and do we have any other folks here that wanted to speak on public comment or any of the items? No, we'll go ahead and then close public comment on all the items and general public comment. Colleagues, on consent, I'd like to move the agenda on consent with the exception of item 3, so we can hear item 3. Is there any specials? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move the agenda with the exception of item 3. Okay, those are approved without objection. That'll be the order. And let's go ahead and hear item 3.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, council members. My name is Khalil Garios, Acting Assistant Director, LA Sanitation. My colleague here, Adel Haj Khalil, and Commander Choi on my right. This morning, what we'd like to do is first share with you some background about the program, and then from there, we'll just go to the data to share with you, and then after that, with the recommendation. I'm going to start first with give you some background, and I'm going to cover the Clean Street LA and the Clean Stat program, and then my colleague Adal will share with you HOPE and Operation Healthy Street program, and then he'll just finish with the recommendation. Our service teams with the entire environmental quality program, we have one Operation Healthy Street team, and then 6 Hope team, 5 Clean Street LA teams, and 1 Clean Stat team, and 1 Trash Receptacle Service team. Prior to January of 2018, LA San had 4 Clean Street LA teams working across the city to conduct cleanup, both illegal dumping and homeless encampment cleanup. Currently, we have 5 teams. We added 1 team in January of 2018, conducting daily cleanup throughout the city. Cleanups are scheduled and performed in response to service requests. The majority of service requests that we receive, they come through My LA 311 app, calls through our 24/7 customer care center, and self-service through our portal, through our website. These are the majority of the calls that come to us as service requests.
Just real, I don't want to interrupt you, but when you said the majority of calls, where are the other ones coming from? There was nothing in the report except for the 311. Are they logged from any other?
Yeah, we receive service requests through 311 app, and we receive those through phone calls too, directly calling our 800 number or 311 by just a phone call, not the app, and also through the website. They go on the website and then they do a service request.
Okay, so that.
So, Adel Hash Khalil, Councilman, I think what you're saying is every request that comes in is logged through the system.
Yeah.
So it's turned into a service request. So what you have before you in the report is the accumulation of every request that comes into the system, whether it's generated by the individual themselves, the constituent, or it's a call that we enter that in and create a service request, or a council office asks us to do something, that's a service request that's entered. So all the service requests that you have.
Because the report doesn't say that. I'll come back to it.
Sure,
Okay.
sure. I just want to explain.
Okay.
All right. Just quickly, let me share some data with you. Just starting with the illegal dumping, this data is from when we start capturing the data in April 2016 till early March. The illegal dumping cleanup service between the January 2017 and March 2nd, 2018, we have received 10,500 service requests for illegal dumping. The average about 750 service requests per month. The average response for completion of the service is about 9 days. 95.6% of requests we closed in 21 days or less. As far as the homeless encampment tickets, from April 2016 to March 2nd, 2018, we received a total of 31,460 service requests, and 25,514 were closed. The pending backlog that as of March 2nd, 2018 is 5,947, and I know now it's a little bit higher than that. It's around a little bit over 6,000. The majority of the service requests that's coming in and the pending one are in this District 9, 13, and 14. Our 2017 average monthly service request that we receive is 1,659, and we close approximately 1,374. So there is an average of a backlog of 285 service requests every month as pending. So based on those numbers, as you can see, the number of SR received every month outweigh the resources we have available to just service them. The total average time to service a service request under an authorization is about 21 days. And in general also, over 12,000 tons of trash were collected in 2017, both illegal dumping and homeless encampment.
So you're referring to on page 7 for 2017 of the report, just so I have the numbers that you're referring to. The report and what you just went over suggests that these are a grand total of 16,000 total service requests citywide, and then it's broken down into council district. Is that correct? And that's for all of 2017?
Councilman, you looking at the table?
It is.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the table, okay. And with that, so I understand also, are those individual service requests? In other words, there could be 5 per one location, or are these numbers
Unique.
Yeah,
unique?
they're just service requests. Those could potentially be, one location has more than 5 or 6, it's average of 6 service requests per location.
Okay, so these aren't, so what, I think what the column that may be missing on this table is,
The total,
not the, well, this is the total
yes.
of all service requests. There could be 100 service requests for one location, they're logged here.
I think you're looking at unique locations.
The location
Right, so
number
you have one location that have,
isn't on here.
Okay.
Okay, just so I understand.
Yeah.
I'll come back to this table later. Okay.
Okay, to go back a little bit, and now we'll talk about the trash receptacle. We also service trash receptacle throughout the city. We be servicing over 4,700 trash receptacle by the end of this fiscal year. These additional bins, we're going to be adding 1,200 additional bins, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, and will be deployed and serviced. And these additional bins will bolster the effort of Clean Street LA by making it even easier to ensure that trash goes where it belongs. And then finally, share with you the Clean Stat. It's the data-driven program that we have staff going throughout the city and assigning numbers to grids and segments. It's on a quarterly basis. Just to share with you some good news, since 2016, when we started indexing our street, we went from a total of, we have a total of 1,347 grid in 1,150 grid in the city. In the quarter 1 of 2016, we had a total 179 red grids. And the last quarter of 2017, that number went down to 26. And we're hoping by the end of this calendar year, this number will be much, much less than 26, hopefully to 0. This will end my presentation, and I'll give it to Adele to share with you the HOPE and Operation Healthy Street. Thank you.
once again, good morning. And let me add up to one of the initial programs that we started as part of the homeless encampment cleanups and in the city was Operation Healthy Streets. That's the effort that started in Skid Row. And where we are today is we evolved over time, and we are conducting a cleanup in that location at every street of the 35 blocks there once every 2 weeks. So every, Monday through Thursday, the streets are rotated, and so every street in Skid Row will be cleaned once every 2 weeks. On the average, about 40 tons of waste is removed monthly from that location. In addition, we have Operation Healthy Streets Venice. As you know, Venice is also a high concentration of homeless encampments across the area, and that's a Friday cleanup. Every Friday there is a cleanup that occurs in the Venice area along the boardwalk and the various areas in Venice, 3rd and Rose and others. On the average, we remove about 12 tons of waste in that area. The next program that was added to help address some of the immediate needs of the city and making us more responsive and agile is working with LAPD and LASA, the service providers and outreach service providers, is the homeless outreach and proactive engagement teams, HOPE teams. And I'm glad that Commander Choi is with us. The intent of the HOPE teams was to put a team together that has sanitation, LAPD, and LASA coming together. And we have 4 HOPE teams that we started in January 2017. Those were broken up by the 4 LAPD bureaus, Valley, West, South, and Central. As of January of this year, we added 2 teams. And thanks to your leadership in council budget and the mayor's support in adding these 2 teams as part of the budget. The first one is the LA River team. The LA River team is focused on the LA River. It has a schedule that has been developed to address cleanup along the LA River tributaries. So the way it was done is the LA River and its tributaries were broken up into 5 zones, starting from the West Valley, coming all the way down to Boyle Heights. We have also the tributaries included, including Pacoima Wash and Tahunga Wash and Arroyo Seco. Those are now on a schedule. We are there we spend a week in each zone, and we rotate. So there's a calendar and a schedule that we do the cleanup. The effort is to ensure the safety of the homeless individuals, plus also the safety of our residents, and also the protection from the proximity to the river during rain, and also to ensure that no pollution, no impact to water quality is present. So a lot of that work is happening. That team, because of the urgent need on the homeless encampments in high fire zones, we were able to kind of merge the two and kind of kill 2 birds in 1 stone. So we have a partnership with Rec and Parks, Fire, LAPD, and us to also, as part of this, focus on the high fire zone areas, homeless encampments in these areas, to do cleanups. And that's being done as part of this same effort. So in Tahunga Wash, we're doing that. In the West Valley, we're doing it in other parts. On Fridays, that's addressed through our Clean LA Streets, to address areas outside the LA River, to make sure that we address this homeless encampments, high fire zones. The second team is a citywide team that is also launched in January of this year. This team right now is just augmenting the 4 bureaus. And the intent that we have is, with your consent and the council's approval and the mayor's consent, that we actually focus and use the areas with high priority to focus this effort on. So the areas that have the highest demand, the highest concentration of homeless encampments, cleanups, and needs, that be focused on, and we use that effort to really focus that effort on. And that's really where we are at this point with the HOPE teams and what we're doing. The HOPE teams, with the help of LAPD and LASA and others, in 2017, we responded to 1,500 calls, processed about 1,512 tents, removed about 500 tons of waste, about 3670 needles and sharps, and made about 16,312 contacts with the homeless individuals. 3,600 were referred to services in 2017. We also are part of the homeless CompStat effort with LAPD, and also with the mayor's CENTCOM. We're reviewing data and what we're doing as part of trying to focus and build efforts in terms of what we're doing. We continue to look at ways to be smart in our response and what we're doing, using data to help us focus the efforts. One of the things that we've done as part of the cleanup that Khalil talked about is before we used to do authorization by location. That means a service request comes in, that service request initiates an authorization. We have to go for every homeless encampment. We have to proceed in accordance to LA Municipal Code 5611 with a procedure that includes outreach to the individual homeless for 3 times through with LASA, a sign-off by LASA. Then we have to get sign-off by the Board of Public Works and our staff. And then we have to do a notice, and the notice has to be between 24 hours and 72 hours window. And then we do the cleanup and then post notice for the storage locations.
Quick question on the notice.
Yes.
And because I do want to get to a dialogue and hopefully have my colleagues weigh in.
Sure.
I think we've all read the reports, and I appreciate it. But on the notice portion, the notice is good for 90 days.
The authorization is.
The authorization is good for 90 days, except for the fact that the day you clean it up, it stops. And they're back the next day. So it's really not good for 90 days. It's good until the time it's cleaned up, and there's a huge flaw in that. And so let's come back to that in the conversation.
Sure.
But if we could just...
So I want to distinguish something, Councilman, if it's okay, allow me to do that. There's a distinction between 2 things that you bring up. One is the authorization, and one is the notice. The authorization is basically our effort to go out and say, LASA has done the outreach to the individuals present at that time. Our staff ensure that this is in a public right-of-way, it's not a private property. And the board has reviewed the process and signed off on it. The notice that we place on the street to say we're coming to clean, that by law has to be either a minimum of 24 hours and a maximum of 72 hours.
Right.
It cannot just start the cleanup, anything in
Yeah,
between.
but here's the problem. So the second you clean it up, the next day they're back. You got to start that whole process again from the beginning, which takes often weeks, if not months. And then you get that 90-day again, you've got to repost. Instead of a Hope Team officer or sanitation going out 2, 3, 4 days later and saying, oh, it's accumulated again, let's post it again, we'll be back in 24 hours. Can't do that. So
we will review that, but one of the issues that...
I think more importantly than review, let's go through, let's not have a conversation.
Let me conclude then.
What I really want to do is, go ahead and conclude. Let's pass it over to Hope, but I really want to open it up to my colleagues.
Sure.
And have a conversation of
So at the end of the day, I think what we're looking for is we're trying to be smart, and one of the things I was talking about is authorization was individually for service request, and what we have done is actually are doing a quadrant, an area that we can authorize the area, and that will allow us to capture as a net the service requests in that area, and that will allow us to do more, and without having to go to an area and clean up the intersection of First and Main, and then at the same time, as we are there is a location nearby we can clean. So now we're getting smarter and creating what we call a quadrant, to authorize a quadrant, not an individual location, which is something that we're getting smarter, and I think with your input we can actually get better as what we're doing.
Okay.
And lastly, I think at the end of the day, it's the service requests that are coming in, and the demand is much larger. We're seeing a huge increase of service requests. One is because of public awareness. Second, because we have an increase in homelessness in the streets. But at the end of the day, it's all about what the service request, what the public's expectation. The demand that we have, the ability to deliver on the services at this point, we cannot meet that demand. And as such, we're working through the mayor and the budget process, and eventually will come to the budget committee and to council for discussion and deliberation on the staffing needs. And then we're working with personnel on a couple of things. One is the process to expedite hiring of staff. We have meetings right now, and we've done a good job in helping us, but we need to do more, and that's something we're proceeding after our committee meeting the other day at Homeless and Poverty. We are following up with them and meeting with them directly. And last thing is allowing us to use the fifth team to be focused on the areas with the highest needs, and have that be targeted, and have the team float around across the city to address the areas with the highest needs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commander Choi.
Good morning, council members. I don't have a formal report for you today, but I'm here to support my partners in sanitation and answer any questions you may have for me regarding the HOPE teams. So.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to open it up with Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hosting an event upstairs at the Bradley Tower, so I have to leave in 10 minutes, so thanks for letting me go here. A couple of quick things. My hope is that this committee will agree with the recommendations of the E&E Committee and also the Homelessness and Poverty Committee and adopt the report, and we can move forward with having that fifth HOPE team focus on the area where the greatest need is. And so that leads to my first question, Adele. In terms of should this committee and should the council agree with this priority, it does not mean that the fifth HOPE team wouldn't have permission to stray outside of the 3 council districts should a serious need arise. It's not, in other words, that's the priority. It doesn't mean that's where they're going to be should a huge encampment pop up just across the boundary in Mr. Rue's district, for example. Is that accurate?
Councilmember, you're talking about the 5th Clean Street LA team, not the HOPE team. The full team.
Yeah,
for authorization, everything.
The
yes.
full team. Yes.
Yeah. The whole idea is with the 5th team is to concentrate on the chronic areas.
Okay.
It's just make sure that anything that we have high service requests and chronic areas, and service requests are pending, it's been pending for a long time, we're going to just tackle those and then just assign the staff to clean up those encampments.
Well, it gives us the flexibility also. If we need to address an area that comes up and it's a high priority, this is not fixed in time.
Right.
Everything is very fluid, And so what we're saying is, instead of having it just designated by geographic area, we think we need to be able to be flexible to address where we believe, based on the data and the information, is the highest priority.
Because I can give you the example. The boundary between Council Districts 4 and 13 is Hollywood Boulevard for a good long stretch. There's a group of homeless individuals who are choosing not to receive services when they've been outreached to 1,000 times, and they'll move from one side of the street to the other back and forth. So I just want to make sure we're both very aware of that situation. So I wanted to just put that out there. I think that something that has worked really well is the whole grid, or I think you called it the quadrant, meaning there's a whole area, because we know that one huge encampment can just pick up and move a block away, and so that we address the whole area, not just the one encampment. I will say this, that I was very, very skeptical of HOPE and this whole arrangement when it was first rolled out, and I've seen vast improvements, and so I want to commend everyone who's part of this. And yes, the success rate is very low, but if you're getting 1 out of 5 to accept some services, that is a drastic improvement to what it used to be. So I think we're on the way to something really good here. I've also thought before, and I still feel this way, that if we don't do enough with these services and we don't put the resources into them, and they're not up to the daunting challenges and not staffed appropriately to address these daunting challenges we have, it'll fail miserably. So I think we should keep going down the road of providing more services for these teams as they work better and work more efficiently, because we're definitely seeing a difference in my district. Mind you, we're still in the top 3 of service calls. And I know it's an imperfect science because you'll get multiple calls on one area, but I'm sure you'll fine-tune that issue. And I just, in terms of the staffing issues, lastly, it was one of the reasons I felt it was set up to fail initially was we learned that there was no conversation between personnel and sanitation in terms of just getting the bodies to make this successful. And that's happening, and I know there are considerable challenges to just bringing people on board. A lot of it has to do also with burnout and just the day in, day out of seeing really horrific things that we find in those encampments. I've been there, I've seen it, and so if you have the same personnel doing the exact same thing and faced with this reality, day in and day out, there's going to be a high burnout rate.
Sure.
So I do encourage some sort of diversity in the job duties as they relate to the encampments. So those are some of my thoughts, but overall, I do want to see the resources to address homelessness in general. They should go in order of highest need, and it's pretty clear that 9, 14, and 13, not to diminish the need everywhere else, but the considerable need in those 3 districts. I wouldn't want to take away from anyone else that has equal needs, but I think that's the way to go with this. And eventually, I would love to see a HOPE team in every single council district with flexibility to focus on where the largest challenges are. I think that would be the most ideal. And I thought of one last one, I'm so sorry, but in terms of the River HOPE teams, you don't focus only on the channel itself. Correct me if I'm wrong. You also focus on the encampments that are along the bike path, along the walking path, those areas that aren't necessarily in direct threat of flooding and danger, but the encampments surrounding the river on either side. Is that correct?
That's correct. Within 10 feet of the bike path, we actually, something that we take care of. One of the things is we don't want people coming down a bike path where they can't see a person walking, and they have to have, so there's a safety issue concern. So we've made a determination 10 feet from the bike path on both sides is an area that we will work through and address through the HOPE team. And that's something we're doing, and I think it's working well.
And I will say this, too. The teams that are assembled between LASA and sanitation and the HOPE teams, et cetera, they have a really good rapid response when there's a completely blocked sidewalk, as per 5611. We had an incident like that just the other day near Fire Station 6, and you all were out there within an hour of me making a phone call saying that not only was the sidewalk blocked, but now the stuff was leaking out into the street, blocking one lane of Virgil. That's how these encampments just explode, and I blame the opioid crises and the epidemic for that. And I hope you're getting costs. Along with this, my recommendation would get costs, real hard costs of all of these cleanups, because we need to go after big pharma. We need to go after the pharmaceuticals for this opioid crisis because it's costing us. Thank you.
Thank you. Just open it up for a second. I've been wanting to have this conversation and formally for some time. When this first started off in 2017 with the HOPE team, there was a lot of confusion in creating such a program because the HOPE team is really just LAPD. That's the HOPE team. But then you have the partnership with sanitation and LASA. And that's never really been defined in how that operates. And it's siloed as how it started off, more siloed, and not connected as much. Though they would work together. That was about the beginning and the end of it. I've been out there countless times, and we work with the HOPE teams, and I call them teams now as everybody's referring to them, even though it hasn't been formalized or codified as some kind of strike team, as HOPE team, sanitation, wraparound services, LASA, others. We added also DOT to that for obvious reasons. First, going into the report, and I wanted to address some of the items in the report. I think from my opinion, first, and before that, the officers and the personnel who are assigned to these strike teams are absolutely phenomenal. They have been incredible. Some of the best that I've ever worked with in the city of LA, who are passionate and compassionate, who take the time. You don't just offer somebody services. Oftentimes these folks are aggressive and combative. They have pit bulls and other animals that are also aggressive and combative. They run across a lot of different dangerous obstacles, and not just in the very population they're trying to help, but often what some of these folks are hoarding in terms of dangerous chemicals and sharps and other issues. They are, it's a war zone, quite frankly, to draw a picture in many of these encampments. And they don't know what they're walking into oftentimes. Many of these encampments that they are the first responders to, there are untold numbers of people behind tarps and tents, and who knows what types of weaponry or other things that they have, which they often do. And so, first, I think we have to talk about the kinds of people that are assigned to this. Everyone I've come across have been absolutely incredible. In looking at the numbers and trying to address it by severity and put money, and it's sort of what we have always done in our philosophy of policing the city, putting cops on the dots, if you will, having CompStat and chasing the crime, making sure that we deploy where most of the crime is. In parts of my district, for example, have been deemed some of the safest areas of the entire city. And because of that, you don't see a single officer very often. So we understand the issue with policing. The difference here is that these numbers, in my opinion, aren't completely accurate. In fact, way off. In my opinion, and it's not an insult at all, I think it was viewed and pulled from 311 and the 800 numbers. It was suggested that it was also in consultation with council requests. I will tell you right now that these numbers don't reflect that whatsoever. And if we're making decisions based on deployment and funding based on these numbers, it is absolutely false. It reminds me of when we closed down fire stations based on wrong data and bad data, and took years to try to fix that. The severity is everywhere. It's in every single neighborhood, in every single community, every single day. And if we have to refer to these numbers at all in making decisions, particularly as the budget is coming, then it's a huge mistake. It will be the biggest one we've ever made as it relates to this task force and team. Having what we have in our HOPE Team Task Force, I will call it an experiment at best. And it was a very good one, except only that. And I think we need to choke it up to what it's been. And I say that because what we've ended up with, for example, is having a task force in each bureau. So we have 4 bureaus in the city of Los Angeles. The task force, if you break it down, actually, and just walk through it, and I think this is really important for this conversation, incredibly important. The task force, basically, if you break it down, is you get basically a task force and one in each bureau, and then they're divided at that point by division. In the Valley Bureau, for example, there are 7 divisions. Valley Bureau makes up almost half the city of LA when you start looking at, but we get one task force. Now, if you break that down further, because we get one task force, there was also only one task force to assign the entire west of the 405 area. One task force when this initiated. 1 day was allotted per week for all areas west of the 405. So that would mean that just in my entire district alone, which is more than just one police division, I would get a task force for 1 day virtually every 10 days. 1 day every 10 days. Now what that means too is if you break that down further, sanitation has to roll in downtown first, because you've got sanitation is comprised of not just the guys on the truck, but you also have
Compliance inspectors.
Correct. And so for hazmat and everything else, they roll in downtown, have to go to a roll call, pick up their gear and their trucks and their vehicles, come down to the valley, which takes 2 hours. The trucks once they're full, have to go to the landfill. They still have a lunch, and they still have to go back and fill out their paperwork, and then that team would have to come back downtown. So that means every 2 weeks, in an area of 72 square miles, roughly my district alone, just as an example, and this is citywide in every district, every 2 weeks we got 3 hours, that was it, and then every other Friday, and half days at best. That was it. Unless they're also pulled off for special projects, or sick, vacation, and scheduling issues. That's where we started off. That's why I'm calling this a pilot program. Great concept. But what if we had it every day? What if we had a task force and a team in every division every day? Now, every day means 4 days a week at best. It also means flexible schedules, which means it can't just be Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, or it's got to be some weekends, some nights, sometimes Fridays. You can't create a pattern because that doesn't work either. So it's got to be some flexibility, and the teams have to work together. So I thought, well, that would be pretty cool. What if we tried that? So I did that. With your support from sanitation and PD, I've funded over nearly $500,000 out of my office budget over the last, we're in the 5th DP of this now. I'll tell you, when I look at the numbers, why I know they're not correct is because when we just look at my council district alone, we've done twice as many encampment cleanups than 311 calls. We have twice as many coming into my office alone that we give directly, so they're not reflected in these charts at all. Adding a fifth hope team is really what I think is barely taking a step forward. It doesn't do a lot, quite frankly. What I would suggest is looking at it completely different. I would suggest we have 4 hope teams per division, 21 divisions, full-time. This is the biggest issue we're facing in LA. We have conversations every single day about housing and wraparound services, but this is the other arm of that, and this is that discussion as well. And making contact with these folks and offering services, even those who are service resistant. But I would suggest we start off with a minimum baseline of coverage, minimum coverage citywide. The biggest issue we have right now is sanitation, is having enough staff and employees. There's a crunch in personnel. It's sugarcoating to say personnel is working with us. They're not. It's not happening fast enough. We have to treat it as these are our first responders equal to our first responders. So the folks who are being hired, there's a backlog in personnel. We need to streamline and change the background process and get folks into the system and fund it correctly. And so my first request out of this is going to be asking personnel to come back with an urgency hiring plan and how they're going to streamline the process. Well, we have to do it. But we need them full-time, and they need to be deployed by bureau, not in terms of sanitation. They can't roll out downtown and then go out to San Pedro or go out to Chatsworth and then come all the way back downtown at the end of the day. It's just not working. And so we've got to come up with a new system and regularize this entire task force by division, is my suggestion. I've seen it now for 5 months that I've paid for, and it works really, really well. But we need to make this citywide in every single division. The other thing I wanted to cover, and maybe trying to put together a more accurate report in what these call numbers are, is going back to your idea also on the 90 days. It's an issue where once we post, or once we get the approval, it's good for 90 days, but it's only good until we've cleaned it up. And then it starts all over the next day. There's absolutely no reason for that. It's a matter of interpretation. So how can we do that differently? How can we interpret that as, no, it's good for 90 days?
One of the issues that we have to do, we hear you, Councilman, I think you bring good points, and we're going to take into it as we continue to look for ways to improve the process. But one of the concerns on the 90-day question that we need to resolve and figure out is the purpose of the authorization is to provide outreach to the individuals. If after the cleanup there's new individuals that are now in the encampment, the authorization have to restart again, and that's really the theory behind it.
Why can't we do it this way, that automatically, and walk me through how it could change? Right after that encampment's cleanup, there's a new authorization that's a clean site for the next 90 days.
And the authorization process, and I want to be, I think we're going to put that on the table. Part of the authorization is actually the outreach to the individuals present before the cleanup. Right. You cannot just do an authorization without the action of a outreach. So if you just go ahead and just do authorization, it's not the mere fact of an authorization, it's the action that you have to do, which is outreach to the individuals. So we clean up today, new individuals come in, then you have to provide the outreach to these individuals.
We can continue providing the outreach.
So, and I think that's the point. And I think we
will not have to start the process over.
Perfect. I think I agree with you. I think you make a great point. What we need to do is sit down and look into it. So I'll give you an example of the quadrant idea is authorizing an area instead of individual location to make us fast. This idea of how we can expedite the authorization process and keep it alive, we can have a discussion with LASA and folks, and I can put this on the table to be responsive to you. I think you make great sense. And I think you make a great point in terms of how we need to do it. The other thing is deploy.
Well, what I'd like to do is, I'd like you to come up with a plan and a cost for each division to have it full-time with the full task force. So I wanted to come back to one more thing.
So in your comment, you said one hope team per division.
One full task force.
Task force per
Police division.
Okay.
Every full-time.
For the 21 divisions, got it.
For the 21 divisions. So right now, you're proposing 80 Hope Team officers, if you will. Okay, so the expansion, you're basically looking at, currently have, the recommendation is currently for 20 officers per bureau, total. Correct?
I think right now what you have is 40 officers, 10 per bureau. That has not been increased whatsoever.
Right, but there's
the only thing that's been increased when we talk about the LA River Hope Team,
Right.
the only thing you're adding in is just sanitation's component, the 4 teams from sanitation
Right.
in addition to LASA.
Right. But they're talking about, one of the proposals on there is to increase it from 10 to 20 per bureau. That's one of the recommendations.
Most recent conversation our department has had is we are going to fix post to each bureau, geographic bureau, 2 officers per division. So for example, in the Valley, instead of having 10 designated Hope officers, you're going to have 14 because you have 7 divisions.
Right.
In Central, you'll have 10 officers. Currently, we have 8, but since we have 5 divisions, we'll have 10 officers. That's the next step. But as the chief has always said, as our partners increase their deployment, we will support them.
But with that, that would, if you do the math on that, it would bring us to about 80 citywide.
No, it'd be 21
Of
divisions.
the 21, only 2.
42, yeah.
2 full-time.
Initially 2 full-time.
That's what we're looking
and
at.
again, as the need arises, we will continue to fill them.
Okay. With that, and the question though is working with sanitation and making sure if we don't have full-time access, you guys are grounded, can't do anything for the most part. And so we need to get sanitation on the same page to come up with teams full-time at each division. When I say full-time at each division, I mean able to work at a minimum of those 4 days for 8 hours in the field, full-time. So if you can define that, report back on that. I think that's critical. One other thing before I turn it over to my colleagues, the numbers also did not include any DOT or vehicle dwellings at all. These are homeless encampment and cleanups. It didn't identify, it didn't even mention the word vehicles at all, which is one of the biggest issues, for example, in the West Valley and the Northwest Valley. And citywide is vehicle dwellers and RVs. Doesn't even address that whatsoever. And sanitation and Hope teams are responding to those every single day. And I'm not sure if even 311 has captured those when people request. So that's where I say the numbers are completely skewed and flawed. It doesn't address those. It doesn't. Now, you could have an encampment coming out of an RV, which most do. That is then not tagged in 311 as an encampment. It's tagged as a vehicle. And then, so we've lost those numbers. And so when we start talking about funding and deployment towards high impact and high severity zones and areas, we lose out again. And when I say lose out, it's everywhere. I'm not saying we, my district. It's every district is impacted because the numbers are just not completely accurate because we're not capturing the totality of the circumstances and what's out there. And so I think we need to look at it from a different lens, and happy to work with you on it. I'd like to turn it over to Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez.
Thank you. So I have a question regarding, again, just going back to some of the data that you've collected through some of these initial efforts. When we talk about LASA, I mean, LASA is a very important part of this entire conversation in terms of tracking the success of the program, because again, for me, it's not just about cleaning up these encampments. It's about also making sure that we're helping to be effective in facilitating many of these individuals, because in my district, we've had success in facilitating several folks out of homelessness. So I'd be interested in seeing, in terms of the data, in terms of the service calls that have been generated, when we talk about how many are truly related to one encampment or one quadrant, because you've received multiple calls, is really kind of dialing in that hard number, because I think it's really important to have that effective conversation when we talk about budget, so that we can actually get down into the meat of where we're actually having these challenges. I know the concentrations that exist in Skid Row. It's really a severe public health crisis that requires that amount of attention. But again, in some of our high fire zone areas and things that we're doing, I've funded a lot of additional outreach efforts, which have, proven to be successful. But I think part of the conversation, for me, and I know we have this at H&P, on committee at H&P, loss is a very important part of this. So in terms of the outreach efforts that precede you going out there, how has that occurred in terms of the seamlessness before you go out to visit these encampments?
I mean, the outreach is critical. We'll be working very closely with LASA. The mayor's office has CENTCOM, Central Command. We're improving the relationship. We're even talking about a unified command center to better coordinate our efforts. I'll tell you, the relationships today that we have between LASA, LAPD, sanitation, and the other departments is the best I've seen the coordination. So LASA is really working close with us, doing the outreach. They were ahead of us doing outreach in the areas with the high fire zones after the LA Fire Department.
I know, because I funded it.
Sure, and we appreciate that, and that helped us tremendously. But you're right. One location that we had in Tahunga Wash, for example, took us, I believe, 3 to 4 days to clean up one location.
Right. But see, again, so this is some of the data that I think would be very helpful, because some of it, again, not all encampments are equal. Right? And so the amount of effort that is deployed as it relates to each of these encampments really determines, again, where we might have a single encampment in one location, which requires very little time, I think we have to really delineate the expense associated with some of these encampments, because I know the severity of what you're encountering in central and parts of South Los Angeles or Venice are far different than what we're experiencing in other areas. But I think trying to help put a better number on that is very helpful when we have budget conversations, because I think we need to really synthesize that information in a way that helps us to better understand the severity of the issue that we're dealing with. And again, for some of these repeat locations, I think, again, I have one location in particular where we have been working very closely with the HOPE teams to address on Bradley Avenue in Pacoima, that is requiring some of that continued ongoing visitation. But again, that's not true throughout the entire San Fernando Valley or other parts. I think getting down into that level of metric is very important for us to see whether or not we're really making progress. But the LASA numbers are also very important to that. Because again, otherwise we're just chasing our tail, which I know that's what it feels like a lot of times. But I want to be able to track the progress that I think we are making as it relates to outreach. Because so much of what we're helping to do on the other end of that is construct the housing that is helping to provide that long-term shelter for them. At least we're doing it in my district. And, I think it's really incumbent upon each of us to make sure that we maintain that shared responsibility to getting there. But I really want to delineate the amount of expense and the kind of get a better sense of the scale of the situation that we're dealing with in each of these issues, because I think by doing that, it's going to help really tell a much more transparent story about what we're experiencing in these different parts of the city.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you bring a lot of great points. And the current CSLA teams, we have 6 teams. Right? Five. And I understand currently we're going to get a 16th. We're going to get a 6th team, right?
We have in the budget an additional 16, but then we have a proposed supplemental budget to increase the total to have 3 teams per each bureau.
Okay. So currently, right now, in the current configuration, it's my understanding that each council office gets about 2 CSLA cleanups per month.
Not every council district get two.
Okay. Well, we get two.
minimum.
Minimum two, yeah.
Minimum
Yeah.
two.
So,
Minimum two.
so with this new budget augmentation, with the 6 team and what you just talked about, the configuration, how much more what more do we get more? I mean, do we get 3 cleanups per month, or, I mean, when it comes down to it, when we boil down to exactly what we get per district or what we get per cleanups?
Councilmember, the way every month we establish the calendar for the next month, and we assign the days based on the number of service requests that we have throughout the entire city. For example,
Is that the new method or the current method?
it's the current method, and then with the 5th team now, we have more available days that will be available to all the council districts.
The current method is basically, each council office will get a minimum of 2 service days per month as a minimum. The remaining is distributed based on what the work and the need. So if there is a need in your district, you'll get an extra day. If somewhere else in other district, you'll get an extra day or 2 or 3, depending on where the need is. But as a minimum, everybody gets a minimum of 2 service.
But I don't want to interrupt. There's a need every single day, and it's not on you guys. You're not getting the funding, but we keep wrapping our arms around this vernacular and description like it was 10 years ago, where we would get a request for bulky item pickup, or we would get a request where there's a need. There's a need every single day in every single area of the community, of every community. So I want to try to get away from looking at service request numbers and My 311 and how often and the frequency based on the need. We've turned the corner on that. We're already off the cliff. It's every single day in every community, and it's not being defined and it's not being funded. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's because I know you know that.
And I'm not saying anything more than explaining the existing process.
I get it.
I want to just make sure I understand that. I just want to
get it.
And then we are working through a process that is going to come through budget committee, the youth committee,
Right.
and through council.
My fear is what's being requested out of budget committee is not even scratching the surface on need. So
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to concur and reconfirm what the chairman was talking about. Because if you're telling me every district gets minimum 2, but it's based on service request, I mean, we could generate the service request. I mean, if had my staff known it is purely based on, and I'm sure every other council district could do that as well. So it's my understanding, regardless of the service request amount that is requested, we get 2. But, so that's why as Councilmember, as the chairman was talking about, with your new budget augmentation request, when that gets into place, I mean, I understand how the new system is going to work, but when it comes down to each council district, are we going to see the minimum of 2 go from 2 to 4 or 2 to 3, or is there any way you could quantify that? Because I understand the frustrations, and I mean, we need cleanups every day.
Give us a chance. I hear the chairperson's comments. I think I hear it very loud and clear. Let's get through the process.
We're going to ask for a report back on recommending these things. So I want to turn it over to Joe.
So we're going to go back and look at it, and I understand where you're coming
Let me
from.
just ask one separate question. So I know you were talking about notices as well as postings, but it's my understanding that once we have a coordinated CSLA cleanup, my office has been told that LAPD requires a 45-day advance notice to all the different respective bureaus, while and a 10-day advance notice with a specific location. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Does the LAPD require that? Is that what you're?
Yeah, that's what we were told.
No, that's. I mean, we're pretty flexible. If we know there's going to be a cleanup, we're not going to let something slide by. We'll send 2 close to it.
Right. No, I think what you're hearing is the coordinated task force to pick up a large encampment is what you're referring to. And when you say 10 days, it's because of the deployment per bureau. And so they're deployed per 10 days per team. But then the requirement for getting the 90-day and the posting and how long that process takes. But I think what you're talking about is the large encampment cleanup.
Right. Yeah. So the
there's
CSLA is the large pick up everything type of cleanup. there is a calendar that comes out, and those might be the
Right.
guidelines of the calendar. But I will tell you, even if it's a day before and sanitation calls me and says, we don't have any LAPD for tomorrow, I will make a call and we'll get the officers. That's not been an issue for us.
I think the biggest question is not LAPD. The biggest question is the authorization that Councilman Englander brought up, and how we can make that a little better. I think there's a process. It takes 45 days to get the authorization process, if not longer. So that's probably what you're looking at. The two things you're looking at, one is the large cleanup that requires a detailed authorization, lots of outreach and sign-off. That takes a long time. There is the HOPE, which supposedly is a rapid response effort. That should be flexible enough, but what triggers it more is not the cleanup. What triggers it is compliance with access and ADA. It's not just doing cleanup using HOPE teams. They're not intended for that purpose. They're intended to provide compliance and enforcement. So if you have an encampment in an area, but it's not blocking access or it's not blocking a sidewalk, you cannot just purely use HOPE to do cleanup. But that's not how it works. You need to have a reason to proceed. So we're trying to be very flexible how we do it. But large cleanup, I think the biggest issue you have is the process it takes for authorization. And I think if we hear what the Councilman Englander is asking for, is to review that process and find ways that authorization for an area can live beyond the cleanup. So we're going to look into it. I heard the discussion, and I agree with you. I think we need to be very smart, and that's something that we all are preaching, how to change how we do things to do it smartly, more effectively, deploying resources better.
So in the report back, Mr. Chair, because I know in the report back you're talking about the 90-day written authorization to live beyond just the cleanup. But also there are times when the encampment, because of rain or whatever reason, might move like a few feet away or across the street. So could there be some flexibility in because if you get...
Yeah, they actually addressed that, I think, right before you walked in. Yeah,
okay.
They're actually...
for a bigger area.
They're going for a bigger geographic area now. They're not just posting it at that specific location.
That gives us that flexibility.
That flexibility, yeah.
Great.
But we can put that in the next report. We'll speak to it, so at least you have it answered as we move on the addressing the 90 days.
And I concur with everything the chairman is asking for.
Thank you. Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your report. Apologies for my tardiness. I was playing the role of dad this morning, so I wanted to first commend and also understand and recognize the challenges that you all face out in the streets in dealing with this quality of life issue. I strongly feel that 5611, as I kind of lobbied and debated, 5611 today, I feel, still does not have enough teeth. Right. And if we talk about the authorization and the cleanups, we put it upon the department to provide its proper protocols. And today, as we're hearing, is now putting a burden on our departments, including sanitation, clearly. And this is now why we're looking at the budget process to add more HOPE teams and Clean Street teams and so on and so forth. Colleagues, this issue here, we're dealing with a specific homeless population, not the single mom with 3 kids who are living out of a car, not the family that just got evicted and is now working on finding a place to sleep. We're dealing with the shelter-resistant community, which continues to drain our resources, which continues to block our public access. These urban campers know that and heavily rely on these HOPE teams to act as housekeeping service. They refuse the help. We're seeing it. I encourage you to come to 8th and Beacon in downtown San Pedro each and every day, and every 2 weeks, HOPE teams come out. They know, okay, guys, 2 weeks, here we go. Let's pick up our stuff, move across the street. Okay, now we'll come back out, and meanwhile, we have service providers out there providing them services and resources. And at the same time, as we're moving our efforts in that region to redevelop and bring investment in, these folks continue to not accept the help. So we're saying we're not giving up on these souls. We need to, as we heard, provide the resources, the temporary shelter, otherwise we face the litigation, temporary shelter, navigation centers. I would like to continue to look at those options in my district, because once we provide those options, then we can start abating sidewalks like they're doing in San Diego. The point where you're forcing these souls to get the help they need and get into at least some temporary shelter. In New York, Domingo reminds me, in New York, they have a right to shelter policy, correct? Are they seeing this issue in New York today? Why not?
Because they have a place for people to go.
Right. So that continues to be, and I know we're moving forward. The mayor's office and this council is looking at different temporary shelter locations, and we have to march our way towards that effort. Chairman, you hit it. The data clearly is not accurate. I can tell you, for one, we've assessed our districts, my 311, for 2017, and saw a total of 749 encampment service requests that were submitted, but the report only showed 421. So I see Domingo nodding his head. What's the purpose? I mean, can you explain that?
We're scheduling a meeting with your staff, and I think we need to understand if there's anything. We heard there's stuff that's not being captured, whether it's the HOPE cleanups are not being captured. We will, as we all said, and our commitment is we're giving you a snapshot of what we're looking at, but that's why we need to understand. So we're setting up a meeting with your staff specifically on this issue. I know Dennis raised the issue with us, and we will do that. But I think some of the comments made by the committee members here, we will take that and continue to look at ways to improve this process, whether it's
because it is a concern. It is a concern. If we're moving forward a data-driven approach, and the data is flawed, then we're not going to get the adequate resources in our district. So I'd like to see, as part of a report back, Mr. Chair, with the breakdown of how service requests are received by council districts, 311 calls, 311 app, sanitation 800 number, council office requests, sanitation, clean scouts. And I mean, God bless these scouts. I don't know if they had their glasses on when they came to my district. It only counted 2 encampments, Q4 of 2017. I can tell you have more than 2 encampments. Just go to 8th and Beacon.
Well, they're big. They just take over the entire district. So.
Mr. Chair, if I can, we heavily rely on boots on the ground. And I see here in the audience Officer Barriga, who is just top shelf. This is an incredible environmental compliance officer. Could I call him to the table? I just want to ask him a quick question, since you are out there each and every day with your folks, working alongside LAPD and our service providers. The question I ask, what do you think could be improved with the homeless encampment cleanups protocol? That's a big question.
Good morning. Thank you, Council Member and Chair, and thank you for asking me to come up and answer that question. It's a very difficult question, but the authorization, if I can clarify for everybody, the HOPE teams do not need an authorization. They can move on any violation, period, as long as it's in violation of 5611. Now, you need the resources to address that issue, and we have one team or one task force per bureau, so you can understand to try to address that. But the authorization itself, the authorization lasts for 90 days, giving us 90 days to complete the task. The reason we close the authorization once it's done, it allows us to move on to the next cleanup. Now, we don't automatically initiate authorizations in anticipation of another cleanup to occur. We're response generated, so we don't just automatically do that. We kind of do Operation Healthy Streets proactively. Operation Healthy Streets, where we need to be in an area every week, is automatically generated. I think if you want to identify chronic locations that kind of follow that Operation Healthy Streets chronic protocol, that would be one way to address the locations that you see need constant maintenance or constant enforcement. Other than that, we would just follow the same policies and procedures we currently have, where we have 90 days once authorized to perform the cleanup task. One of the things our director has always said is we don't police the homeless. We're there to address the public health and environmental issues, and we do that. I think the issue is, and we've always discussed this, is how do we get that chronic protocol or procedure in place for all the locations. Currently, we have a system called Operation Healthy Streets that does that. If we need to add more locations to that, I think that would be a possible solution.
Yeah, but there are very minimal locations on that.
Right, it's Skid Row in Venice.
Pretty much it.
That's it. There's nobody else that has.
And meanwhile, first of all, thank you for stepping up to the table, and thank you for what you're doing. I think the first words you said, we don't have enough resources, that we have one team per bureau. That's it. You could just drop the mic at that point. You can't do anything in terms of volume, and because what I see, and I need to close this out real quick, so thank you for bringing them up too. You stayed right there. What I see is frequency and volume, because right now it's just sort of dancing around the edges, and it's just not enough. In fact, you guys have been so successful that our Metro contract has recognized our HOPE team and wants to establish our HOPE team on the trains and buses, so we can get people to start riding again, because a lot of this population, and I think Joe hit it right on the head. These are the people we're dealing with are service resistant and just keep moving around. We're not talking about, and it's not, you create a shelter right down the street, they don't want it. They don't want to go. So the only alternative we have at this point is to continue to frequently visit them every single day and make sure they're in compliance and picking up their belongings and not creating these encampments until they get to the point, because we have to, it's a matter of public safety and health, until, if ever, we get to the point where they're accepting service and trying to build a relationship and a rapport with them. But at this point, it has to be a combination of, moving along to help those in financial need, but the bulk of the population, the supermajority of these folks, are mental health and drug or addicted folks. That's the population that you guys are dealing with the most, 99% of the time, every single day. So with that, this is what I'd like to do. So,
if I can, there shouldn't be, now the passage of Measure H, there shouldn't be excuse that we don't have enough service providers or emergency response teams. Voters passed Measure H. Let's mobilize, work with LASA, get them out in the streets.
Yeah. So I think what we'd like to see back is, number one, the idea of codifying this team into an organization, in terms of we have multiple silos that report up with different reporting techniques and different criteria and methodology for capturing data. So LAPD has one way, sanitation has another way, LASA has another way, DOT has another way. When I ask for reports in my district, for example, or divisions within my district to say, how are we doing? I get 9 different spreadsheets, all calculated in different ways. And so there's no uniformed command structure. And I'm not sure if we need that needs to be created. This is full-time, every day within the city of LA, and it's the number one issue we face, that we don't have a structure at all. Sanitation sort of does their thing, and PD does theirs, and we've got environmental that does theirs, and y'all work together really well on the street level. But I don't think the top command has a structure. And it should be daily, and so there's got to be some type of, we've got to codify this into and define what a HOPE team is, which has never been done. People hear HOPE team and it's PD, but then sanitation. So there needs to be a HOPE task force that's identified, and what is it, and who do they all report to, and how is the information managed? How do we collect the data? That it's all uniformed, so we know what we're looking at, we know it's accurate, because we're making data-based decisions.
Well, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for saying that. And I want to thank Commander Choi. He's going to be visiting my homeless task force tomorrow because that's exactly what I'm leading in my district. Because I think, again, loss is the missing piece in this conversation.
Right.
With the funding of Measure H, those outreach services are paramount. And the SPA leads, I will also suggest that each of you really engage your SPA leads to making sure that, some of the service resistant have actually accepted service in my district as a result of our SPA leads. So engendering the trust, helping to build those rapports, taking down those encampments, all of those things are seamless when done right, when it's done correctly. Right. But I think the reporting is a very important part, that we're accurately measuring the amount of money and energy that is going into these encampments. But again, a lot of that has to do with the SPA lead, and I want to make sure that before we engage in throwing more money at something, and again, chasing our tail, I would rather make sure that we are actually seeing the efficacy of these efforts through the outreach, because I know where it's working and I know where it's failing. Right. But I'm doing that I'm using my district as a prototype for this.
I think we all are. We all have different prototypes and pilot programs. That's the problem, because we know that the departments are working so hard but there's not a unified structure citywide to do this, and I think that's what we're missing here. On the last note, I've got a meeting later today, in fact, to talk about Metro taking our 11 Hope officers. My answer is no. We can't afford to lose them. And even if they were going to pay to replace them, who are we going to get? I mean, it's hard to find enough folks, and so just letting you know that. I don't want to lose what we have. We have the best and the brightest. And
that meeting.
Yeah, you'll be at that meeting. Sanitation, same thing. If anybody tries to take our environmental engineers or our folks that are driving the trucks or working with our task force and trying to put them anywhere, forget about it. These are the best. We need to expand them.
So Mitch, if I can, you sit in a good position for us, representing us not only here in public safety but also in budget. So that's going to be the real challenge.
This is going to be the
start
the challenge. So what I want to see back,
but if we're going to prioritize this, we got to budget it.
Is a way to come up with accurate data. Not accurate data. Don't refine the reports, but report back on the methodology to work together and how you're going to start collecting data. And why don't and perhaps talk to some information data analysis experts and analytical experts and maybe some CompStat experts, and figuring out how do we, and who should be the lead agency on that? Who's the LEA on collecting this data? Because they're coming in, and we're all frustrated because this was never been asked from the beginning, right? And so it should have been with clarity on here's what we're going to collect, here's how we're going to collect, and here's what we're going to report back. That was never brought up. And so here we are today. So not looking to blame, but looking to move on. It's nobody's fault. And so we need accurate data. So that's number one. And then the second thing and final thing is to come up with a structure where this team, whatever it's called, identify what the team is called and who's on it and how they're deployed, how often they're deployed, how many hours they're together in the field, not in roll calls, not picking up equipment, but to report back on the team structure and how many hours in the field together per day they work. So define that and explain it in some detail so we can fund it accordingly. And then the last thing is to come up with a plan and a price to put one of these teams full-time into every division. And what's that going to take? And then as the obstacles arise to implement this and get it funded, and anything short of funding this in the mayor's budget will be an insult to the city of Los Angeles. And if we don't support that, and I don't just say that the mayor's budget, the council's budget, ultimately, because we're the ones that get it, and anything short of that would be an insult to the very voters who said we'll tax ourselves to help this issue. We have to do this. It's the most important function before us. So that's what we would like back, and how do we go ahead and what are we looking at in that space to get that done? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we'll work through, which is, you helped us tremendously, as what you need is a process for the data. And I know we are, just to let you know, one thing that we're working with in our department is is consolidating management of this effort into a single management
That's
effort.
what we need, yeah.
Just to make sure, and also citywide, we're working with the mayor's office and LAPD on this effort. The other one is the structure. One thing that we did ourselves, actually, one of the things that we realized is travel time. So in our yards, sanitation yards, we put in involuntary storage, so we don't have to drive downtown to put these. So we have one in Gaffey, one in East Valley, one in West Valley. We have at different locations. We did that on our own because that's to make our job easier. But deployment from the locations, travel time is a huge issue for us. We're talking about it, synchronizing hours, all that stuff. So I'm glad that we had this dialogue. I think we'll go back and we'll provide the information both to you as committee, but also to the we're working with them.
We really appreciate it. We're relying on you for that. So
No.
it's and anytime you guys want to meet offline on this to walk through it, I'd be more than willing.
Just to let you know, I mean, we feel that we are fixing a plane while flying it, by the way.
Oh, we all are.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, without any landing gear.
Yeah,
we know.
I mean, we're doing this.
We know.
And I think I'm proud of our workers. I'm proud of every single person in LAPD that worked hard. I'm asking them to do more and more, but there's
We need to
work
take it to the
done.
next step. Yeah.
And the question, how we can make it easier and more effective.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you all. Colleagues, real quick on item 1, I need to reconsider item 1 to approve the report with an amendment to recommendations to request the controller to transfer $40,000 from the UB, and that creates the fire position control officer to the fire department, and refer to the item Budget and Finance Committee. So go ahead and move without objection. Okay, that'll be the order. That concludes the agenda. We are adjourned.